Hello, hello, it's John, your movie madman, and I have returned once again to this channel because it's the Movie Madman channel, hence why you keep seeing me. Today I'm going to talk about Scream. So I'm going to say spoiler alert, this is more talking about the full uncut version of the movie, which not a lot of people know exists. So that's why I'm bringing it to your attention. There is a full uncut version of Scream out there, and that's what I'm going to be talking about. I'm going to be talking about the bits of the film that have been trimmed down, cut out, blah blah blah. If you haven't seen the film Scream, I might suggest you watch it first, because otherwise that film's going to be ruined by the time this is over, because we'll be telling you about quite a few little details in there, alright? So the history of this film goes, for me, Scream is one of my all-time favourite horror movies. So much to the point that one day I decided I'd be really cool and watch it with the audio commentary on. And I was watching it with the director's commentary on, and I heard Wes Craven talking about the NC-17 cut of the film and all of the bits of the film that they had to trim down to get an R rating, and that is what this full uncut version is the NC-17 version, before they had to cut all this stuff out and trim it down and things like that. Believe it or not, when Wes Craven first made Scream, it was originally supposed to be a comedy. Yeah, not a lot of people know that, but obviously he's not very good at being funny, and it turned out to be a slasher movie. But all the way through it, you'll notice, if you listen, instead of watch, if you listen to the dialogue, you'll notice all the way through it that there is a lot of comedy in there. It's a very referencey movie. It references other horror films and points out things from other horror films all the way through, which I think is probably one of the best written films that I've ever seen, which isn't down to Wes Craven, that's more down to Kevin Williamson, the man who wrote it. But still, they teamed up. For those of you that didn't know, Scream was originally going to be called Scary Movie. Yep, and then obviously Scary Movie was made, which was a spoof of Scream, so that's quite interesting. Well, I found it quite interesting. I don't know if you did, but I found that quite interesting, so I was passing on the information, alright? You don't have to... There's so many things about this film that I love. The opening, that first, 15 minutes, is just incredible tension. The way that's written, with just one girl on the phone, it's just great. It just really is, alright? It just is. Okay? So, anyway, on to what I said I was going to be talking about. Let's start at the very beginning, as Julie Andrews once said. On to the bits that are different, alright? The beginning of the film, when Casey's boyfriend is tied to a chair outside, there's a different take on his gutting. When you see the uncut version of the film, you literally see the guy's guts roll out of his body, and you're just like, oh, that was different. In the R-rated version, you just see his head tip slowly back as his eyes close, and then later on you see a shot of his guts already hanging out. But in the uncut version, you actually get to see the guts falling out of his body, which I guess was probably a little bit too graphic for an R rating. Move on to the bit at the end of that sequence when you see Casey hanging from the tree, and her mum screams, huh, funny that, she screams at the body, and then the camera zooms in on Casey hanging off the tree. If you compare the R-rated version to the NC-17 version of that, you'll notice that in the NC-17 version the camera zooms in a lot slower than it does in the R-rated version. I don't know why that had to be changed. I mean, it wasn't particularly graphic, but yeah, there you go. The camera zooms in slower. It's literally like a couple of seconds, if that. Maybe even less than a second longer. But they literally had to cut a few frames out. As sad as that sounds, I don't really get that. But yeah, when you see the R-rated version, it looks like someone's fast-forwarded the video, whereas if you watch the uncut version, the camera does move in a lot slower. The next is the death of Tatum, her friend Tatum. You know, the girl that gets crushed in the garage as it lifts up she sticks her head through and she gets stuck, and then the killer pushes the button and the camera comes up and her face gets squashed against the roof of the garage, obviously killing her. In the uncut version of that bit where her head gets crushed, you see that in a little bit more detail. Literally, again, only by a few frames. A lot of this is just literally a couple of frames. You probably blink and you wouldn't even notice that anything was different. But I mean, if you blinked, you'd miss it. So keep your eyes open when you're watching it. You get to see that head get crushed a little bit slower, so that's quite exciting. Still looks pretty grim, to be fair, I thought. After that, Kenny, the cameraman, Courtney Cox's cameraman, he gets his throat cut. It's probably one of the longest extensions in the film, because in the uncut version he turns around and he puts his hand on where he was bleeding. He looks down at his hand. None of that is in the R-rated version. You only get that in the uncut version, which you can't get in England. I bought mine from Germany. That's it there, like, it says director's cut at the top. It's quite exciting. You can see all the foreign writing on the back there. Just the DVD as well. Can't even get this on Blu-ray, so I cry about that at night sometimes. The next 3 cuts, or should I say the final 3 cuts, are all towards the end of the film. The scene at the end where Billy and Stu are stabbing each other. There's a few extra stabs which you might not even notice. I mean, I didn't notice the first time round watching the uncut version. I didn't notice the extra stabs. It was only until I read the censorship report that I was like, oh, I didn't know that was extra. So you get a couple of extra stabs. I think Stu gets stabbed in the arm, or there's more injury detail in one of his arm stabbings or something like that. But also the weirdest part is there's a puddle of blood on the floor that Stu's standing in, and you can see like the blood dripping off his hand and onto the floor, which you don't get to see in the 18/R-rated version. You only get that in the uncut version. But that was probably the weirdest bit for me. I mean, there wasn't anything I thought particularly graphic about seeing blood drip off of someone's hand and onto the floor, and you can see like a little puddle of blood on the floor that he's standing in, whereas in the normal version you just see a closer shot of whatever her name is, Neve Campbell's character's dad is like tied up on the floor behind him, and you see the shot of him rather than it being a bit more open and you seeing the blood on the floor as well. So it's all very exciting. I mean, I love uncut versions of films. Obviously, I mean, who likes censorship? I'm not going into censorship right now. I'll do that when I talk about the ratings video. I'll do censorship. I'll talk about my censorship side of things as well there. So that'll be it for today. But yeah, definitely enjoy the uncut version of Scream. For those of you that didn't know there was an uncut version, now you do. Good luck buying it. I mean, I was talking to one of my YouTube friends on one of his live streams about the uncut version of Scream, and he didn't know it existed. And I was just like, oh, I'll be really nice, and I'll send him a link. And literally I couldn't find it anywhere. So I don't know if it's been erased now or if it's listed under something else. To be fair, when I first heard about the uncut version of Scream myself, it took me absolutely ages to be able to buy it. I must have bought, the amount of times I bought a copy from like another country, and it turned out just to be the same version. And I was just like, ugh, that's the version I've already got. Buy another one, ugh, that's the version I've already got. And it was quite annoying, actually. I bought this, which is the French copy, and the French copy is like the 12A version, so like all of the swearing's cut out, all of the violence is cut out. I mean, considering it's a horror film about a slasher killer, like a 12A version of that, it'd be like watching a 12 version of Saw. It was pretty pointless, but the cuts were so funny that I just kept it anyway, because I just thought it was really funny. But yeah, I mean, if you can get hold of the uncut version of Scream, it's definitely worth watching for that extra like 15 seconds of footage. It's probably not even that, you know, 15 seconds roughly, maybe less. I don't know, I didn't look at that in too much detail. But yeah, that's it for today, so I'm going to go. Enjoy the rest of your day. If you could like this video, like I liked Scream, if you could subscribe to the channel, that would be really nice. And I will see you later.